Okay, so Santa and Penguin Polly rode in on Lawn Chair, the reindeer, down to pick up some Taco Bell. Well, okay, to get some lights for the barn. But Santa promised Polly a cheesy potato burrito. You see, Santa noticed poor Nestor, the long-eared donkey, was sad and thought some twinkly lights for the barn would cheer him up. After all, it's pretty gloomy back there. However, to everyone's surprise, when Santa arrived at the store to get the lights, they noticed a polar bear and a Tweety bird had already used all the remaining lights for the Christmas display, and now there were no more lights available. Lucky for Santa, the manager was a former elf of his, Mrs. Spock-Ear Jingle. She had all the lights Santa needed and already packed them up in gift boxes. Santa chuckled and they took off, and Miss Spock-Ear Jingle said,
"Bye, Lawn Chair. Bye, Polly. Bye, Santa."
And they disappeared into the sky.
Reindeer flying never gets old,
she thought. Then she turned around and she sees Santa Claus offering her some milk and cookies from years past. Confused, she asked,
"What's going on?"
Santa Claus replied, "Lawn Chair has been kidnapped by a bizarro world Santa and is being controlled by an insanely jealous penguin named Polly. I need your help, Mrs. Spock-Ear Jingle. You're my only hope." Then suddenly, Polly's twin brother Pokey popped out of Santa's gift satchel and warned Santa about Polly's plan to ruin Christmas.
"Santa! Santa!"
Pokey shouted.
"A clone Santa army! That's what he's doing!"
"A clone Santa army?" Santa said slowly. "I knew about the Bizarro World Santa, and that's why I needed Mrs. Spock-Ear Jingle's help. I needed her to pretend that she was Mrs. Claus and lure him into my trap. Well, we can still do that, but what to do about the clone Santas?" Pokey had something to show Santa.
"I overheard Polly talk about his plan, and I know the secret to stopping the clone Santas."
"How convenient," said Santa. Pokey continued.
"Look over here."
Behind the Taco Bell was an igloo. Inside the igloo was a life-size clone Santa. Pokey explains.
"I didn't know what to do with them, so I put them in my old apartment. I got this igloo when Polly and I worked on Beakman's World. Now to stop the clone Santas, you need to make them eat milk and cookies. The clones can't digest it, and then they break down and stop moving."
"We need to get cookies," Santa shouted loudly. Then they quickly, unceremoniously, got into an Uber and went to the North Pole. The Uber driver happened to be one of Santa's trusty reindeer, Lawn Chair's son, Badminton. "Badminton!" Santa shouted.
"Hey, Big Red. Just trying to make a little extra scratch before the holidays,"
Badminton explained.
"You can only live on Skittles and Rainbows for so long, old man,"
he said under his breath, and they all hopped in, and off they went. Just as they were about to land, they were flagged down by Pokey's nephew, Polly Jr. "Land over here, Badminton," Santa shouted.
"Have you seen my dad?"
Polly Jr. said.
"This isn't that fish story, kid,"
said Badminton. So Pokey, Santa, and Mrs. Spock-Ear Jingle ran into Santa's workshop. "We have lots to do," Santa shouted.
"What about the fair?"
Badminton said defiantly.
"They can't hear you,"
said Polly Jr.
"No worries, Junior. I'll just take some of those Skittles until your Uncle Pokey pays me."
So Badminton took the Skittles and flew off. Looking down, he said,
"Don't look so sad. Your feet aren't that cold. You're a penguin."
And off he went. Back at the general store, Bruce and Tiny, that's the polar bear, and Tweety bird, were locking up for the night, reciting lines from The Princess Bride. "Anybody want a peanut?" Tiny said, and they both laughed and high-fived. They looked into the 100-foot mirror display in the store and saw the reflection was huge. Then the reflection magically came to life. The mirror image jumped and crashed out of the storefront window.
Well, that's something you don't see every day. A 100-foot polar bear and Tweety Bird running downtown North Pole,
smirked Bruce.
Tiny, we better tell Miss Spock your jingle. Call a reindeer,
Bruce said as he lit a cigar. Meanwhile, just above Candy Mountain, Butter McSchnickens was doing cartwheels and celebrating like it was the 4th of July.
Come to me, my pretties,
she said, and a huge shadow covered the area. And there, in front of her, was a 100-foot polar bear and Tweety Bird.
Tiny, Bruce, thanks for coming,
Butter McSchnickens said.
When do we get to play?
Said Bruce.
Soon,
Butter McSchnickens said.
Soon.
So Tiny licked his lollipop and Butter McSchnickens juggled presents as Bruce chuckled.
Back at the workshop, Santa's trying to call somebody. Hello? Can you hear me? It's me, Nicky Boy, Santa said. Pokey and Miss Spock jingled giggled. Hey, old boy, I hate to ask you on short notice, but I need a solid, Santa continued. Now, what everybody doesn't realize is that it's Frosty the Snowman on the other end of the phone. Okay, I'll see you soon, Santa said, and he hung up the phone. You almost ready, Miss Spock Jingle? Santa shouted. By now, Miss Spock Jingle has put on Mrs. Claus' Sunday best. And if I do say so myself, she does look like Mrs. Claus, Santa explained.
Okay, so we have no time to waste, said Santa in a rush. Pokey, go get Armchair from the barn. Okay, this is what we need to do. So Santa whispered to Miss Spock Jingle. Then there was a brisk gust of wind and a young Armchair appeared. Santa said, Armchair, please take Mrs. Claus, wink wink, down to town to run some errands.
Oh, my pleasure, Armchair said. And, yeah, by the way, Nestor loves his lights.
Santa turned his head quickly. What do you mean? He asked. Armchair looked confused. Hey, wait a minute. How'd you get here before me? Weren't you just in the barn? Santa asked. And just then, the Penguin comes through the door on roller skates. It's not Junior, it's Corey, Junior's best friend.
Where's Junior? I got skates for him,
said Corey. Hold on, everyone, stop, Santa said. Corey, take off those skates, and Miss Spock Jingle, close the door. Armchair, go and find Junior, Santa said. Then Santa pulled out a little cinnamon stick out of his pocket, put it in his mouth, and said, Okay, listen up, kids. We got a situation in the barn.
Meanwhile, in the barn,
You'll never get away with this,
said Joy. A voice from the dark quietly said, Quickly stack those toy boxes. Back at the workshop, Santa is laying out a plan to the group, and Rudolph stops in. Hey, Santa, said Rudolph. Hey, Rudolph, what's going on? Glad to see you, pal. Come on over here and join the group, Santa said excitedly. Out in the frozen snow, Armchair found Junior. No, no, why? Armchair cried. What's wrong? Said Junior. You're frozen out here, Junior, Armchair cried.
No, I'm not. I'm a penguin,
Junior explained.
Oh,
said Armchair.
But if you stay out here too long, you can start to see things, like this floating head of my dad.
Armchair is freaking out.
Don't worry, Armchair, said Junior. His head just looks like my dad, but all it does is float around.
And the head floated by and made sounds like boop, 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 boop.
Now Santa wants to see you inside,
said Armchair. So Armchair and Junior walked to the workshop. Meanwhile, back at the barn,
Shut that donkey up,
Polly shouted.
I can't hear myself think.
Now, why do you want to do this, Paulie? Said Santa's head reindeer, BMX. Pipe down. You're upset because nobody wants to ride you anymore, Paulie shouted. Now for my plan. Turn off those lights, you two. He was speaking to Bruce and Tiny. And wait for my signal. Then, like he was shot out of a cannon, TW, Pokey's alter ego, appears. Lights are on, and riding Nestor triumphantly. Impossible, Paulie says. You see, what you don't know is that Santa told the police to go get Armchair, and that Pokey was kidnapped by Paulie and his gang. I have the spirit of Christmas behind me, and I can do anything, TW boasted. And TW grabs the clone Santas and forces a chocolate chip down each of their gullets, instantly rendering the Santa Claus clones useless. Then TW turns to Bruce and Tiny and says, You two! Bruce and Tiny run out of the barn into the yard screaming. At this time, the 100-foot Tiny and Bruce also arrived in the front yard. This catches everyone's attention. Miss Spockier, Jingle, and Joy took one look at each other and knew what was going on, and without saying anything, they both ran towards Butter McSchnickens, and they all collided, making a brilliant light. Bruce and Tiny and the 100-foot Bruce and Tiny were magically sucked into the light, and a big flash happened, and all that was left was a baby polar bear that said,
God bless us, everyone, and a new year to boot.
So by now, the adrenaline has worn off. TW is back to Pokey. What just happened? Pokey said. Did I just see what I think I did? Where's Joy? Where's Mrs. Spockier, Jingle? Where's Butter McSchnickens?
Here I am,
a new elf said.
I'm Miss Toe. The best thing that could have happened out of this Christmas debacle. Now here's a kiss,
she said. Then, at the top of the barn stood Paulie. This isn't over! And as he was plotting his revenge, he noticed another Santa Claus walking in the background. What he didn't realize, that it was me, the author. I was in that suit. No telling what could happen next. Then, a huge eraser comes out and erases the end. A pencil appears and writes, and out of nowhere, Frosty the Snowman and his henchmen of snowballs come out firing out of the sky towards the group. Oh no! Shouted Santa. I forgot to cancel the airstrike. To be continued.